Go to 16F, litigation report, Deputy Attorney General Harry Ward. Mr. Ward.
Thank you. For the record, Harry Ward, Deputy Attorney General. We have submitted in the support material is my litigation report for October and November. Just want to let you guys know that the information in the litigation report is non-privileged information. In other words, you are my client. Everything in this litigation report comes from the public record of court filings. At the last meeting, Commissioner Johnson requested the meeting to update you guys on litigation, and thus I have, through the help of Suzanne and the chairman, have scheduled a litigation attorney-client meeting after this meeting. It is exempt from the open meeting law. It is a non-meeting meeting between you and me, an attorney-client privileged meeting. So please stick around for that meeting if you have any questions in depth concerning litigation. If you have any questions generally, I am available at this point regarding the litigation update.
Any questions? So just keep in mind for the commissioners that we will be sticking around after the meeting to meet with our DAG to discuss litigation matters that will not be open to the public as a non-meeting attorney-client privilege.
Thank you.
That will close agenda item 16F. Go to agenda item 16G, regulation update, which I will provide. Report on outstanding, pending, and future regulations that may require commission consideration over the next year. Really, the intent of this was for me to give the commission as well as the county advisory board and the public an update on where we stand with some of our regulations. So when we get into the new year, we'll kind of have a sense of the things that we're going to be dealing with. If you'll recall, at the last meeting, we did pass a series of 4 regulations that had been temporary in nature, and we had passed those as permanent. One was awards and issuance of tags for elk incentives. That has since been approved by the legislative commission, as was the firearm carry during archery and muzzleloader season, as was the regulation in regards to trapping questionnaire deadline and trapping license valid dates. We did get the special incentive elk tag arbitration regulation deferred, as there were some questions, and maybe I could turn that one over to staff for just a brief update on what those questions were by the legislative committee. Deputy Director Rob.
Jack Robb, for the record, I don't know if you can hear me, but Brian and I went down and presented that, and we were questioned by Senator Ford on the portion of the elk arbitration that said the decision of the arbitration panel is final and binding, because he thinks there should be another process beyond that for anybody that disagrees with the decision of the commission, the way that the new regulation reads. That language was not new language. It was language that was there existing, that the decision of the panel that was appointed by the commission was final and binding. So we didn't have any type of answer to come up with, because it wasn't anything new. It really caught us cold. In follow-up discussions with staff, we've looked for NRSs, NACs, anything that could make that regulation final and binding, or something that the legislature told us our decision was final and binding. We can't find that, so I believe we're going to have to bring that back to you guys to change a little bit of language that says it is not final and binding, give them another avenue to take it to the next step if they want to. At this point, it won't pass without that change. Once Senator Ford brought it up, others piled on, and it's dead in the water until we make a little bit of a change. So the elk arbitration that we've seen 10 times now, we're going to see 11 or 12 now.
Okay. Thank you for that update. We did have a series of regulations, and some of these ones are oldies but goodies that actually the legislative commission had deferred back to the agency. One that we, I believe, had a workshop on but have not moved forward with is the shed antler regulation that had set essentially a season on shed antlers. We had a trap registration regulation that defined how registrations would be marked on traps. If you'll recall, during the legislative session, the language on that was changed from must register traps to may register traps. So essentially, the regulation that we had in place that had been deferred back is no longer valid or consistent with NRS because of that change. We had another regulation on trap visitation where we had looked at decreasing trap visitation times around urban areas of Washoe and Clark counties. Those were deferred back. We have tried to seek clarification from LCB in terms of what exactly it means when something is deferred back and how we're supposed to proceed, because I don't believe anything happened during the last legislative session that would have changed those regulations or made them inconsistent with other state laws. The same is true for the demerit regulation that was passed quite some time ago that was deferred back until after the session. It's my intent as chairman, if we don't get clarification on how to handle those deferred regulations, that I will ask the department to resubmit those after the first of the year for future legislative commission consideration. And at that point, I guess we'll know one way or the other where we stand. Other regulations that have been pending or out there, we did have a trail cam regulation that we had put out quite some time ago. I don't think a draft ever was provided through LCB, so it's kind of permanently on hold. I would like to move that forward next year. We had 3 regulations that had been proposed for consideration by the Black Bear Committee, one in regards on tagging the black bear, one on the commission's authority to dictate where you could or could not hunt black bear with a dog, and the other in terms of whether or not you could use a shotgun while hunting black bear. It would be my intention next year to move those 3 recommended regulations forward for consideration. We had a couple that we had discussed prior. One was the flying regulation and adding drones into the flying regulation. So at some point in the next year, we'll see that. Law enforcement had a couple, one regarding smart rifle triggers that had been brought forward to them from a conservation group. The black powder issue, which we talked about with black powder substitutes that we had acted on previously, needs some further cleanup. Licensing had a bonus point transfer for big game applications between resident and non-resident cleanup that we need to address. Law enforcement also had cleanup on a whole ID number regulation. And we will have one other regulation that I know of in regards to AB 136. Tyler, did I get that number right? In regards to assisting with disabled hunters that I would like to have done early next year as well. So those are the regulations off the top of my head or off the list that I have in front of me that we'll be addressing within the next year. That is by no means a complete and comprehensive list, but it gives you a pretty good sense of where we are on regulations that have either worked through the legislative commission process that have been deferred back or that are just more or less on hold at this time until we move forward next year. Are there any questions on any of those? Anything I missed?
Chairman Drew, I have one question. I know I have several, but I wanted to know, when you get that back and it says deferred back, they give you no other specification as to why?
I know on the shed antler one, they had asked us to look at placing a private property exemption on it. The other 2 simply said deferred until after the 2015 legislative session. I don't believe there's any other specifics that I can recall. Mr. Rob, is shaking his head.
The justification that was provided by the individual that made the motion for deferment spoke to the dissension in the room and said that neither side seems enamored with this, therefore that was kind of the justification that nobody liked this, so it must be universally bad, so let's postpone it, defer it till after the session, and then it wasn't remedied during the session.
So therefore you think resubmitting it again in the same form and seeing what they say the second submittal might shed more light onto how that might proceed?
That would be my hope.
And the challenge that we have with this particular regulation is that there's statutory responsibility associated with the commission considering it and making that recommendation. So we're acting in accordance with statutory direction to do so. So we want to make sure that we're complying with the direction that NRS is providing us as a board.
Additional questions on regulations? Okay. With that, we will close item 16G, and that will wrap up our informational reports. We'll open item 17, future commission meetings, commission committee assignments. Secretary Tony Wasley and Chairman Drew for possible action. The next commission meeting is scheduled for January 29th and 30th, 2016 in Las Vegas, and the commission will review and discuss potential agenda items for that meeting. The commission may change the time and meeting location at this time. The chairman may designate and adjust committee assignments and add or dissolve committees as necessary at this time. The anticipated committee meetings that may occur prior to the next commission meeting will also be discussed. Director Wasley, do you want to start us out?
Certainly, thank you, Chairman Drew. The primary order of business for the department at that meeting has traditionally been the season setting process. The season setting process is a process that sets season dates for 2 years. This is the interim year. However, it doesn't preclude the commission from making adjustments or modifications to any of those seasons. So that will be the primary order of business. I guess certainly, Mr. Chairman, if it's your desire to delve into any of these commission policies or make those assignments, that could be another potential agenda item, as well as the regulations that you just spoke to. Also, I'd like to point to a commission calendar. There is a stack of documents there. I believe each commissioner has a color-coded table. There's been an expressed desire by some commissioners and some county advisory boards to kind of formalize the business at each meeting, and it might be a good idea to circulate that more widely if it's deemed that commission input or approval of that document is required or desired.
Okay. I will work with staff to determine which regulations might be ready to go in February. I know we've got some deadlines coming up. Chief Turnipseed and I had visited a little bit on that, so we'll see which ones we can get to LCB in time for the January meeting in between all of the holidays that are going to occur between now and then. As far as committee meetings, Commissioner Wallace, did you have anything committee meeting-wise, Heritage Committee meetings coming up?
The only thing that brought to mind here is I saw on this planning calendar, the Heritage regulation, and I don't remember having a meeting for that last year. I started thinking about it. I think that was, like Director Wasley said, the interim when we did it for 2 years.
Okay.
So, unless I'm mistaken, I don't think we need to have that meeting unless you want to do something with those heritage policies, because the next month, I believe, we'll be having.
Okay. I don't think there's any pressing need for a policy update that fast. So, Commissioner Bliss, did you have anything on Wildlife Damage Committee?
No, actually, I think, I remember in also 23, I think the department will introduce this coming year's plan to the full commission. And after that, then we'll take input from groups and whatnot at the following meeting. So the March meeting, I haven't.
I can't recall. I know Tag Allocation Application Committee was thinking about another meeting, but I think it was set to occur prior to that. Commissioner Johnston is gone today. The only other committee that I'd like to maybe see meet in conjunction with the next meeting would be Administrative Procedures, Regulation, and Policy Committee, so that we can start moving forward with the policy review. Perhaps we can schedule that for Friday morning. So in that vein, I did want to go through, since we're kind of wrapping up the year for our meetings, committee assignments. And this won't be a final list. Commissioner Hubbs, we still need to visit a little bit on committee assignments. But I did want to get some committees reset here, or at least let folks know where we stand before we get into the new year. So as far as the Administrative Procedures, Regulations, and Policy Committee, that will be chaired by Commissioner McNinch. The other two members of that committee will be Commissioner Wallace and Commissioner Valentine. We still have a BEAR committee established. At this time, I'm going to dissolve that committee. Any of the BEAR issues that we need to address in the regulations going forward will be dealt with by the commission as a whole. And I appreciate everyone's efforts on that committee. I know it wasn't necessarily always the funnest committee to be on, and it took a lot of work. But I think we're at a point now where the commission needs to move forward with the recommendations. Duck Stamp Judging Committee was Commissioner McNinch and Commissioner Wallace helped with the judging, so we'll keep that committee with those two for now. Elk Damage and Incentive Committee, we're not going to change anything. Commissioner Wallace will continue as the chair, with Commissioners Morite, Valentine, and CAB member Lytle continuing on that committee. Finance Committee, I have removed Commissioner Lane, and so it will be chaired by Gil Yannick. We'll leave Commissioner Johnston on, and Clark CAB member Paul Dixon will remain on. Legislative Committee, we don't have a lot coming up. I will continue to chair that, and along with Commissioners Young, Johnston, and McNinch for the time being. I am going to remove Public Representative Kyle Davis at this time, and as we get closer to session, I will reevaluate who needs to be on that committee. No changes on the Public Lands Committee at this time. State Predatory Animal and Rodent Committee, Tag Allocation Application Hunt Committees, no changes. Trap Regulation Committee, again, that's one that at this time I'm going to dissolve. Again, much appreciation to the committee members. I think we're at a place where we need to work out some of these issues with the Legislative Commission. If there's a need for a committee in the future, we can always reestablish something. Wayne Kirch Conservation Award Judging Committee will remain the same. Wildlife Damage Management Committee will remain the same at this time, pending some further discussions. Wildlife Heritage Committee, no change. And Wildlife Scholarship Recipient Committee, no change. Are there any questions on where I'm going with the committee assignments? Okay. Any discussion on the next meeting or agenda items that we haven't captured so far? Right? This is an action item, so I'll take it out for County Advisory Board input. 17, future commission agenda items. Any public comment in Reno? Public comment in Las Vegas?
Yes.
Yes, public comment.
Hi, Stephanie Myers for the record. I want to thank you for the town halls. I'm sure that it's very time consuming and it can be aggravating, I'm sure, but you guys are still not addressing the 97% of us who are non-consumptive users. We don't hunt, we don't trap, but we still pay for NDOW. We pay for NDOW too, and you have a duty to address our concerns. Many of us have specific interests. We think the black bear hunt and the coyote killing contests are unethical. I think you saw a lot of that yesterday.
Can I ask you a quick question? We're still
Yes.
on agenda item 17, future
Oh,
commission.
I'm
meeting.
sorry. I heard public comment, and I apologize.
Yeah, if you have something specific to 17, we'll take it now. Otherwise, give us just a minute. Okay, so any other public comment in Vegas on item 17?
Shoot.
No, Chairman.
All right, how about Elko?
No public comment.
Okay, so I'll bring it back to the commission. At this time, I don't believe we need a formal motion for anything moving forward. Obviously, we'll have a little bit of time between now and the next meeting for everyone to enjoy their holidays. Anything else that we need to address before I close that item?
Mr. Chairman,
Waffle. Good question. Commissioner Valentine.
more discussion on, since we're talking about meeting dates, can we talk about the March meeting? Because it happens to be during spring break, and that is the weekend of Easter. Is there a possibility of moving that meeting date?
Yeah, so the way the agenda is written, I don't think we can change that meeting date at this time, but probably something Director Wadsley and staff that we'll want to take a look at. I think this is the first time that we'll be doing the waterfowl regulations in March. And so I don't know if there'd be an ability for us to move that up or back. I think back, Paul, if I'm not mistaken, would probably be a better move, especially for county advisory boards. So that's something we'll need to look at and see if we can make that work, because I know Russell will probably have the Western Flyway meeting coming up shortly after that, and any other conflicts that may pop up. So something to definitely look at, and if we can move it, we'll take that formal action at the January meeting.
Okay, thank you.
So the thought would be to move it closer to April.
Yeah, I think it would be the first week in April. We might have an April Fool's. Does that mean you aren't going to be at basketball?
No, if you go the other way, right now I'm good. But if you move it up,
You're out.
then I'm out.
Okay. All right, something we'll discuss in January. Anything else? We will have WAFWA between now and then. I will work with staff to make sure we have the commission representatives selected for that. I'm kind of going to go by seniority on that, but I'll be talking with commissioners on who has an interest for WAFWA from the commission standpoint. Any other items? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close item 17. We'll go to item 18, public comment period. Persons wishing to speak are requested to complete a speaker's card and present it to the recording secretary. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes. No action may be taken by the commission at this time. Any item requiring commission action may be scheduled on a future commission agenda. Public comment. In Reno?
Way too quiet.
Chairman Drew and the commission, speaking on behalf of myself right now in public comment, but something that involves Clark Cab is that you often have informational items. Like today you had the town hall meetings and a couple other things. And the cabs often will agendize those things and give you information or action reports with that. I always wish there was a way for some of those informational things where we could give some input back into the system. And I'm not sure how you do that, if there could be a giving comment from a cab versus having public comment. That makes any difference, and that might have to be worked out. But there are some of the informational things the cabs would like to give input on while they're informational, because we do agendize some of those. I know Corey does, and I do, and I believe they do in Waukesha too for discussion. It would be nice to figure out a way that we could get some active meeting discourse with you, or if we have to do that all by a correspondence. And if we could figure that out, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Additional public comment. Come on up, Kathy.
Kathy Smith, speaking on behalf of myself. First, I wanted to thank the department for arranging the town hall meetings. As well, Mr. Wakely was very respectful and did an excellent job entertaining questions from many diverse opinions. Unfortunately, many of the non-consumptive members of the public do not distinguish between the commission and the department. And although I'm hopeful of more dialogue on the killing contest, I really don't see a solution for public distrust and public frustration until we have a truly participatory process. And a participatory process is a component of government transparency, and requires decision makers to be persuadable. And that's not something we have here. The majority of this commission is not persuadable, and that results in public frustration. Unfortunately, that frustration is often displaced to the department. So I hope you guys consider that when you make your decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional public comment, Reno? Seeing none. Public comment, Las Vegas. Ms. Myers.
Hi, Stephanie Myers for the record. I'll just pick up where I left off. But many of us have very specific interests. And we don't feel that you are addressing the 97% of us, the majority of Nevadans. We think that the black bear hunt and the coyote killing contests are unethical. We think that the coyote shouldn't just be considered a varmint and be an unprotected species. Perhaps you could take that up sometime. Many of us, and my special interest is that there need to be more and better restrictions on leg hold trapping. There should be quotas, like for any game, there should be quotas on the fur bearers, how many of them can be killed. There should be much shorter visitation times, and trap registration should be mandatory and should be enforced. And there should be more exploration of non-lethal methods of dealing with predators. Mr. Wasley wonders why more of the public is not here. Well, we're here when we're passionate, and some of us are here anyway. But we're tired of constantly attending and constantly testifying, both here and even worse, much worse, at the cabs, testifying, and any opinion which is not right in alignment with the sportsman is either mocked or just totally ignored, almost always ignored. And so we're tired of never being heard by having our concerns addressed. And if you went somewhere and your issues were always ignored, you'd probably stop coming too. So, but we do thank you very much for the video conferencing. Thank you.
Additional comments in Las Vegas?
No, Chairman, thank you.
Public comment in Elko, agenda item 18.
No comment.
Bring it back, last call in Reno. Seeing none, I'll adjourn the meeting.